Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad. This is season 2, episode 2, titled Grilled. This is Clifford Humphrey, and I'm here with my brother Caleb, and we're going to discuss this episode. So we always start off with the title, thinking about reflections on what this name, why did they choose this name, Grilled? I've got a couple thoughts. You got anything?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of broken up throughout the episode from different point of views. You know, you got Hank trying to grill down on people trying to find Walt, and then you got Tuco grilling them on what's going on with are they trying to screw him over? But I'm just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably more accurate. I was looking for this throughout the episode, and I did notice 2 things where Tuco is grilling meat on a grill.
Oh.
And then when he has his shootout with Hank, he shoots up the grill of Hank's Jeep or whatever it is he's driving.
Oh, man. You were really into this one, aren't you?
No, but that just shows both of those are completely insufficient and unsatisfying. So I think that the better explanation is that, there are people who are quote unquote getting grilled, as in, what does that mean? To get grilled means to be pressured into something, right?
Yep.
Maybe get pressured with questions. I think that's probably a better explanation than the other 2 that I thought of. So, okay. So yeah, it starts off in an odd way with this. It's very creative the way they do this. It's like the last episode with the creepy stuffed animal that's face is burnt off in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
They leave you, they try to confuse you, right? They want you to ask, how in the world did this happen? Like, how did that car end up like that in the middle of the desert with those, bullet casings all around it and everything? So very clever. Then it goes to Hank, and there's this scene with him in the, agency, and he's trying to get everybody psyched up to go find Tuco. And, you get to see a little bit of Hank's leadership qualities here as a motivator and all of that. But then he walks out of there and says, yeah, we're never going to find him. And then he says this. He says, he's talking to, what's his partner's name?
Gomi,
yeah. He says, appearances. It's all about appearances. And in that instance, he means we have to look like we're confident that we can find him, even though he's secretly not confident, right? But I wonder if that line is meant to signify more than just that, if it speaks to more than that, appearances, because, you could take this pretty far if you wanted to, but Walt is keeping up appearances, about who he is, and secretly he's somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of comes into play, I think, a little bit at the very end of the episode. So we can come back to that. But I just want to, again, my assumption is that none of this is accidental. And so that line was put there for a reason. Does it, can we figure out why based upon what else happens in the show and in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, the whole rah-rah speech he was given, like, it just felt very, high school, middle school, like, I can't hear you. Let's hear it again, guys.
Right.
It was very
campy, very campy.
Yeah, exactly. But like when he was talking about the whole appearances thing, I mean, there's definitely some truth to that,
Okay. A theme that I saw in this episode was devotion. You see Skyler really devoted to finding Walt, right? And she's going to great lengths. You'd think she would be justified, right? She's pregnant, right? She'd be justified if she just sort of said, look, I just can't even handle all this. I need help. and I'm just going to kind of cave in on myself. But no, she's out there. She's, she and Walt Jr. are printing out those posters and they're putting them all over town. It was impressive, I thought, how determined she was to find Walt, and she keeps that up.
She kind of switched gears a little bit, because all throughout the last episode, she was kind of given this impression that she was just over it. Like, she didn't care. Like, oh, you're gone again.
That's
Walt,
right.
And
That's
now,
right.
like, I think with him just on the edge of possibly telling her, what was going on, by saying, I don't know where to begin, and I think that kind of got her interested, and then disappearing was just like overboard, like she literally hit up every single place that she could think of, like more places than I would think of to look for. But yeah, it was admirable.
So then the second instance of devotion that we see is Walt toward Jesse.
Yeah, I loved that part, because you actually see him stand. I mean, I guess you saw Walt kind of stand up for Jesse against Tuco when he shaved his head, and becomes Heisenberg. But this one, it was more of like a father-son type of approach. I feel like he was being Jesse's protector in a sense,
Yeah, and
which
it's
I thought was pretty cool.
Right. And it's worth noting that their relationship started with Walt basically putting a gun to Jesse's head saying, you're going to be my partner or I'm going to turn you into the police, right? Gave him no choice. And what has started to happen is probably as a result of the crazy consequences that they've suffered. They've been through a lot, and it's only been, I don't know, how long has it been? Like a couple weeks, maybe?
Yeah, at most. It can't be long.
And they've already been through so much. So now, even though they're sort of just using each other, right, to get what they each want, right, they are finding in that enterprise a common bond. And what is there to say about that? Just that friendship arises even out of difficult circumstances, which is I think a phenomenon that people experience in war. You hear about that. Caleb, you and I both spent a summer fishing in Alaska. Somehow, for some reason, you went back, and so you spent 2 summers there. We were commercial fishing, and we were part of a crew, and we were out on an island that we were there at different times, but we experienced the same thing. We were on an island about a mile around, an island off the coast of Kodiak Island, as remote as you could possibly be. When I was there in 2003, there was no internet. And so all there was handwritten letters. And we were working 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was really, really difficult. But through that trial, the crew members all develop, I think there's the French phrase that I think puts it best, esprit de corps. There's a spirit of the body of everyone there, right? That arises. That's a common, some kind of, a bond that's hard to describe, but it arises out of going through something difficult together.
And it's funny because like you kind of see in just this one episode the progression of Jesse, because at first he's like, hey, Walt, like you're about to die anyways, just rush him, bum rush him, and save me.
Right.
And like he was only thinking of himself. And then as it goes on, with the gun to his head outside, like he really does, like, I mean, it was self-preservation, but at the same time, like I think I got to believe that he was, looking out for Walt, because he saw Walt stand up for him, against Tuco.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of fun to see progress.
Okay, so we'll just flag that now, that there's at least the beginning of some kind of friendship, sacrificial friendship that we see between Walt and Jesse, which is a departure from their original, very selfish, a pure friendship of utility, as Aristotle would call it. And now there's something a little bit higher than that, because Walt easily could have made a list in his mind of pros and cons of keeping Jesse. And he might have concluded, well, if I make a deal with Tuco and say, hey, yes, why don't you, kill Jesse, and then I'll do this thing for you. And, as an act of loyalty, he could have said, he could have said, hey, Jesse tried to poison you just now, by the way, that,
Right.
And then he would have killed him, and then he would have built trust with Tuco. He could have, in other words, he could have thrown Jesse to the wolves in order to gain for himself, but he didn't do that. So he's already doing more than just calculating his own interest. And Walt, we're going to discover, of course, is a complicated character, right? He's a mixture of a lot of things. So let's just sort of credit him this element of selfless friendship toward Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of see him, and maybe this kind of just goes with his education and background, but when presented with a problem, he's always trying to think of, an answer to it, instead of like freaking out like Jesse was, like he you could see the wheels turning. He was trying to figure it out, with the meth, the poison meth that they had, like he was constantly thinking about something else, like.
What's interesting is when Jesse's freaking out, when they're sitting there on the couch in front of Tio, Jesse has one of his freak out moments, and he says, like, well, look, why don't I don't know, I'll just hit him over the head with something. And then, right, or he was saying that Walt should do that, but he's showing a kind of impetuosity, right? And it reminded me of that scene at Jesse's house earlier when he's like, well, what if we just kill him? I'll just shoot him. And then Walt's like, okay, what's going to happen next, right? You've got to think through this, and what, and in that scene, he shows that Jesse's kind of immature. He's naive. He hasn't thought through how complicated this is, right? And if you look at this on a scale of, where courage is demanded, there are two extremes, right? There's cowardice on one side and rashness on the other. And in that scene, Walt is urging Jesse to back away from rashness toward courage, like be more cautious. If you try and just rush out there, that's not going to work, But what happens in this episode when Jesse does the same kind of freak out, well, we'll just hit him over the head and then we'll overpower him, we'll take his gun, right? That sounds like the same kind of impetuosity, but this circumstance calls for exactly that.
Right.
And what ends up happening? Jesse hits Tuco over the head with a rock.
Right.
Now he's got a gun, but he recognizes that circumstance calls for extreme measures, and it's going to look like impetuous perhaps, but when you're you might be about to be executed, that's what you've got to do, and I was going to say it shows. I'm impressed. We're jumping ahead a little bit, I guess, but so in that moment when, let me back up. I think Walt demonstrates courage on a very high level when he puts the poison on Tuco's meal.
Yeah, right behind him.
Right. I mean, he could have, it was so easy for him to get caught, and he was, right, by Tio. But what you saw there was Walt taking action, right? He didn't have time to think about it. He knew it was now or never, right? And he puts the rice and laced meth, on the burrito, whatever. And so, like, let's credit Walt with some courage in that moment. And I don't think Jesse would have been able to do that. In that scene, Walt is demonstrating courage and Jesse is demonstrating cowardice and impetuosity at the same time, right? Where he's too afraid to do anything, but he's also planning of like, well, I'll just rush out there and I'll just, he's not able to act well because he's not able to exercise courage. And Walt is.
Right. Well,
he doesn't.
I feel like he doesn't think through the whole solution. Like when he says, let's just bum rush them, like Walt just looks down and he's like, just hit him over the head with something. And he picks up the fly swatter. It's like,
yeah,
what do you want me to do? Like
right.
Guess again. What, like that does not work.
Right. But then but then further down in the story, in the episode, it flips, right? When Jesse is the one who's about to be executed by Tuco, and Walt is sitting there and trying to act, but he doesn't know what to do, right? He's not going to jump on Tuco because he's smaller, I guess. He's kind of frozen, and he says, well, we were about to poison you. Like, he He tries to exercise courage, but it kind of comes out awkwardly.
Yep.
And then when Jesse hits Tuco over the head and he drops the gun, Walt picks it up. And it's clear Walt doesn't know what in the world he's doing. He's pointing the gun and he knows if he's as liable to hit Jesse as Tuco in that moment. And he's not able to do anything. You'd think he would run up and maybe even hit Tuco with the gun or something. He's sort of frozen in that moment. And what happens? Jesse acts and Jesse shoots. And I think it's important to know that Jesse, who before is this sort of impotent guy who's been kicked around by Tuco how many times, he's the one who finally shoots Tuco. So they've flipped in a way where Walt is now the one who's not able to act because perhaps for a lack of courage, and Jesse is.
Yeah, it was nice. You bring up a good point. It was nice knowing that Jesse was the one that, obviously Hank was the one that finished him off, but like that Jesse was the one between him and Walt to handle it because Jesse was the one that was picked on all the time, being thrown on the ground, already been beat up by Tuco once. So it was nice to see that he got some revenge there.
So I'm confused why they left Tuco wounded in that ditch thing. Why on earth would they leave him? They've already seen. Remember what happened last time, right? When they tried to poison Crazy 8, the guy came back. Why would they not think that Tuco?
I think it kind of just shows that their amateurness when they see him bleeding, they just assume that he's going to bleed out. That's why they're like, just let him bleed. I mean, they both have guns. Jesse's got the pistol. He's got the rifle. It's like,
but they can't
do something.
That's the thing, right? Is they can't afford those kinds of risks. Maybe you're right. They're naive and they don't know that, but they can't afford that. Now, almost immediately, they see a car coming and they assume that it's Tuco's cousins.
Right.
But I still don't understand what their plan was, right? If it had been their cousins, and we know it's not, but if it had been Tuco's cousins, they show up, Tuco's there and he's able to talk and he says, yeah, those guys, they're right over there. Like they would have been toast. I don't understand what their plan was. They and when they run away, they don't bring the gun. I mean, just absolute naivete or incompetence. I'm not sure, but I don't know why they didn't kill Tuco. That was either cowardice or naivete or what, but major blunder there, I think. Well, so the last point I was going to make was I think it's interesting that when Hank shows up purely coincidentally, right, and finds Tuco and is able to take him out, when Walt sees that it's Hank, he runs into the desert.
Right. He just takes off, right?
He doesn't run up to Walt and say, or Hank and say, hey, you great job, good shot, you helped us out. Maybe he's thinking, I couldn't explain myself here, but I still don't understand how he's going to make it any easier for himself now that he's running into the desert. He's running into the desert. He has no water. He has nothing, right? Like what on earth does he think is going to, I don't know. But I think it was interesting that he doesn't run to Hank, and there's a choice that he makes there, right? You can either run forward to Hank or you can run backwards into the desert. And I'm trying to think, what are the things that he's calculating in that for that choice?
Yeah, I mean, when he sees Hank, you see a frightened Walt right there, and so for him, I believe it, knee-jerk reaction was to be like, he can't see me here, like I got to distance myself right now, and just took off. And he didn't even give himself a chance to kind of problem solve like he normally does.
Well, you don't always get the time to do that. You got to make choices quickly.
Right. And Jesse was even kind of surprised. He's like, what do you mean? Where are you going? Who's Hank? He doesn't even know that Hank is his brother-in-law at that time. He knows that he has a brother-in-law in the DEA, but he doesn't know that that's him.
Right. Yeah, right. And I'm sure Jesse's thinking, what about my car? One person they're not thinking about is Tio.
Yeah. Man, a few words, right?
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's I don't know what else to say about Tio.
My favorite part at the end is after Hank walks up on a dead Tuco, you just hear ding ding from inside the and then it cuts to credits. But I thought
Yeah,
that was brilliant
that was clever. That was clever.
because he has no idea what's going on out there.
Okay, anything else from this episode that you wanted to note?
I mean, there's just little things, like I
Yeah.
love how Marie was finally she used the whole Walt disappearance to kind of get back in good graces with Skyler, and even then
Yeah.
she still was trying to just like
Excuse
she
herself.
brings and she brings it up one more time as a last ditch effort to really change Skyler's mind, and Skyler was like, this is the last thing I want to talk about.
Yeah, because last we heard was that Marie was constantly reaching out to Skyler, and Skyler was not answering the phone. And Hank comes over and is like, hey, do me a solid, please return the phone call, right? And so clearly what happened was Skyler calls Marie and says, hey, I need your help. Walt's missing. And Marie jumps at the chance to, probably help out her sister, but also to get back into that relationship. But you're right, she's using it as a way to try and fix the problem.
It was also her idea for Hank to reach out and find Jesse, like the whole time. And she was like, well, did you tell Skyler about the second cell phone? And I just get this, like the Michael Scott vibes of him, like trying to like tell you like, shh, 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 like don't say anything.
Right.
But yeah, so that should be fun to watch in the next couple episodes, that whole 2 cell phone thing play out. I think we covered the major parts. Is there any other things that you think needs talking about?
No, I think that's it. So I can't think of anything else to talk about for this episode, but it's definitely set things up. So things have come to a head in a way. So now Tuco's out of the story, and Hank is getting dangerously close to discovering how Jesse and Walt are caught up in all this.
Yeah, the next few episodes are going to be pretty telling to see how everything kind of plays out.
Okay, well that's a wrap. Let's just call it there, and we'll be back next time for the next episode.
All right, and as always, please subscribe if you haven't yet. If you enjoy it, leave us comments, good, bad, anything. We appreciate the transparency back and forth, and as also, if you haven't subscribed to the Patreon account, there'll be some fun stuff there as well.
Awesome. All right. See you next time.